Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. Truth, as always, is in the details. In 1820, an Egyptian papyrus was found that listed every pharaoh of Egypt in sequence, a meticulous administrative document compiled under Ramesses II around 1279 BC. Near its beginning, the list records 10 kings who ruled before Menes, the legendary first pharaoh of the First Dynasty. Their combined reign totals 620 years. The document is authentic. It is the finest king list from ancient Egypt. Egyptologists classify those 10 pre-dynastic entries as mythological and move on. But the question that is rarely examined is why. The Turin Papyrus is a practical administrative record. It was used to calculate the sequence and duration of royal authority. It records verifiable historical pharaohs with accurate reign lengths. Why would the scribes who compiled a factual administrative document begin it with 10 fictional rulers? What exactly were they recording, and where did those numbers come from? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The official story of technological progress follows a reassuring arc: stone tools giving way to bronze, bronze to iron, iron to steel, and finally the Industrial Revolution catapulting humanity into the modern age. In this narrative, each generation inherits a slightly more sophisticated toolkit than the last, and no knowledge is ever truly lost. It is a comfortable story. It is also, in key respects, demonstrably false. History is littered with technological achievements that appeared centuries before their supposed invention, vanished after the cultures that created them collapsed, and were reinvented, often with great difficulty, by later civilizations who had no idea the knowledge had ever existed. Roman concrete was stronger and more durable than most modern concrete and was not matched again until the 21st century. Greek fire, the incendiary weapon that protected the Byzantine Empire for centuries, has never been fully reproduced. Damascus steel, capable of holding an edge that modern metallurgists struggle to replicate, disappeared with the craftsmen who made it. These are not myths. They are documented historical losses of genuine technical knowledge. When we encounter an object from the ancient world that should not exist, a battery from Baghdad dated to the Parthian era, a computing mechanism salvaged from an ancient shipwreck, a map showing geographical features that were not officially discovered for another millennium, the temptation is to dismiss it as misidentified or misstated. That dismissal is sometimes warranted. But when such objects accumulate, when the pattern becomes too consistent to ignore, the honest response is to ask whether our model of ancient capability is simply wrong. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Turin royal canon, known as the Turin King List, is a hieratic papyrus compiled during the reign of Ramesses II, approximately 1239–1213 BC, and found at Thebes around 1820. It was purchased by Bernardino Drovti and subsequently acquired by the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy, where it is held today. It is considered the most important ancient Egyptian chronological document known. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the papyrus originally listed all Egyptian rulers from the earliest times through the Hyksos period in the Second Intermediate Period. The document is severely damaged. It was broken into fragments before proper conservation, and many names and reign lengths are lost. The surviving portions include sections of the historical dynastic sequence and the anomalous pre-dynastic entries at the beginning. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the pre-dynastic section of the Turin King List records 10 rulers before the first historical dynasty, with individual reign lengths ranging from several hundred to more than 400 years each. The total combined reign of these 10 rulers is recorded as 36,620 years. They are listed in the same format as the historical pharaohs, with names, reign durations, and reign totals. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Manetho, an Egyptian priest who compiled a history of Egypt for Ptolemy Roman II around 280 BC, produced a king list that similarly begins with dynasties of gods ruling for tens of thousands of years before the historical pharaonic period. Manetho's list names the gods Hephaestus, Helios, Agathodemon, Kronos, Osiris, and others as early rulers, with total pre-human reigns of over 15,000 years. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Sumerian King List, a Mesopotamian document of comparable function compiled from around 2100 BC onward, follows an identical structural pattern. It begins with 8 antediluvian kings whose reigns range from 18,600 to 43,200 years each, followed by the statement that the flood occurred, and then records historical kings with credible short reign lengths. The parallel with Egyptian practice is striking. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: pre-dynastic Egypt, the period before the unification under Narmer around 3100 BC, is an active area of archaeological research. Sites including Hierakonpolis, Nakada, and Abydos have revealed sophisticated pre-dynastic cultures extending back to at least 4000 BC. The transition from the Neolithic to the state-level society of dynastic Egypt was more gradual and complex than earlier scholarship assumed. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that mythological and theological introduction as standard royal legitimacy practice. The mainstream Egyptological interpretation holds that the pre-dynastic section is a conventional theological prologue linking human kingship to divine ancestry, a standard feature of ancient Near Eastern kingship ideology. The 10 pre-dynastic rulers represent gods or divine beings rather than historical humans. The main objection is that the same document records verifiable historical pharaohs in the same factual format. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that garbled folk memory of pre-dynastic rulers whose genuine reigns were numerically inflated over centuries of oral transmission. A compromise position that accepts some historical substrate to the pre-dynastic section while explaining the impossible reign lengths as exaggeration or miscopying. This would make the Turin pre-dynastic section comparable to the biblical genealogies in Genesis, where extreme longevity may encode compressed chronology or dynastic continuity rather than individual lifespans. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that literal historical record reflecting a different calendrical system, a minority view that the extremely long reign figures represent years calculated by a different unit, months, seasons, or lunar cycles rather than solar years, which, when converted, would produce plausible human lifespans. This interpretation has been applied to the Sumerian King List as well, though no agreed conversion formula exists, and the resulting figures vary widely depending on assumptions. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the Turin Papyrus itself is an authenticated ancient document written in hieratic script on genuine 2nd millennium BC papyrus. The same document that records the impossible pre-dynastic reigns also records historical pharaohs with reign lengths that correspond to known independent evidence, confirming the document was intended as a factual chronological record rather than a purely mythological text. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the Sumerian King List presents an almost identical structural pattern, fantastically long prehistorical reigns, followed by a rupture event, followed by historical rulers with credible reign lengths, in a completely independent Mesopotamian tradition. This cross-cultural parallel is evidence that both documents reflect a shared ancient administrative convention of preceding human history with divine or semi-divine rulers, not evidence of shared memory of actual events. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed divine king legitimacy ideology is thoroughly documented throughout ancient Near Eastern political culture. Egyptian pharaohs were understood as living gods, Horus in life, Osiris in death. Legitimizing a king's authority by connecting it to a sequence of divine predecessors was a political and religious necessity, and lists of divine or semi-divine ancestors served this function regardless of their historical accuracy. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. No Egyptologist accepts the Turin pre-dynastic reign figures as literal historical data. The Divine King legitimacy framework is the consensus explanation, well supported by the broader context of ancient Near Eastern kingship ideology and the parallel Sumerian King List. The Turin document's genuine historical value lies in its dynastic section, which provides chronological information about the historical pharaonic period unavailable elsewhere. Pre-dynastic Egypt continues to be revealed through excavation. Hierakonpolis and other sites show sophisticated, organized culture centuries before Narmer, but nothing in that evidence supports the literal interpretation of the King List's impossible reigns. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Turin King List, Egypt's record of rulers who reigned for thousands of years, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Turin King List ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.